A tutti, grazie soprattutto a Paola per avermi invitato e per avermi convinto a intraprendere questo studio sul ritmo, di cui effettivamente prima non avevo pensato potesse essere così interessante. Ecco. Era una cosa che rimaneva, direi, quasi inconscia nei miei studi. Adesso questo è stato un input che mi porterà, penso, a grandi sviluppi, spero. Right, parlerò in inglese perché qui ci sono anche i miei studenti e le nostre lezioni le facciamo in inglese, a meno che qualcuno proprio non abbia obiezioni. Okay. So, my paper today will be about Dickens, especially about Dickensian rhythms, the Pickwick papers and its Italian translations. Now this morning I just realized when Professor Giaveri was talking that I have actually used a lyric caesura in my title, which is a threefold part, and in fact actually my paper will be in three parts. First, I will explore the word rhythm in Dickensian terms, then we will briefly talk about the rhythms in the Pickwick papers, and then very shortly we will see the Italian translations, what happens with them. Now, we've been talking about rhythm. Rhythm in literature is something very difficult to grasp, and this was very clearly defined by the great author and scholar E.M. Forster in his treatise Aspects of the Novel. Our interludes, gay and grave, are over, and we return to the general scheme of the course. We begin with the story, and having considered human beings, we proceeded to the plot, which springs out of the story. Now we must consider something which springs mainly out of the plot, and to which the characters and any other element present also contribute. For this new aspect, there appears to be no literary word. Indeed, the more the arts develop, the more they depend on each other for definition. We will borrow from painting first and call it the pattern. Later, we will borrow from music and call it rhythm. Unfortunately, both these words are vague. When people apply rhythm or pattern to literature, they are apt not to say what they mean and not to finish their sentences. It is, oh, but surely rhythm, or, oh, but if you call that pattern. Rhythm is sometimes quite easy. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, for instance, starts with the rhythm da-da-da-dang, which we can all hear and tap to. But the symphony as a whole has also rhythm, due mainly to the relation between its movements, which some people can hear but no one can tap to. This second sort of rhythm is difficult, and whether it is substantially the same as the first sort, only a musician can tell us. What a literary man wants to say, though, is that the first kind of rhythm, that da-da-da-da, can be found in certain novels and may give them beauty. And the other rhythm, the difficult one, the rhythm of the Fifth Symphony as a whole, I cannot quote you any parallels for that in fiction, yet it may be present. Now, I tried a better definition of rhythm, so I resorted to the Oxford English Dictionary, and I saw that the meaning we want to use in this case is classified as 1D. So it is rhythm is the measured flow of words or phrases in prose, speech, etc. Any instance of these. Now, as you can see, the word existed in English before, but in this special meaning, it started appearing in English literature in 1832. Why is this important? Because this is when Dickens started writing. So it is no wonder that in Dickens's works, the word rhythm is not used as the flow of the language, rather it is only used as the musical rhythm. And actually the only two cases of the use of the word rhythm in Dickens's prose is in The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And the first time is in musical rhythm as he withdraws his amiable phrase from door, and And the second one, again, is related to music and dancing, usual rhythm and dance. Now, Dickens was a master in rendering rhythm. What do we mean by rhythm? Okay, we've just seen this. Rhythm is a very complex word. He was a master in rendering the rhythm of life, the rhythm of his society, what was going on at his time. And we can actually see in his works a discrepancy between the rhythm of life and the rhythm of the diegesis. Now, away with a shriek and a roar and a rattle from the town, burrowing among the dwelling of men and making the streets hum, flashing out in the meadows for a moment, mining it through the damp earth, booming on in the darkness and heavier, bursting out again into the sunny day so bright and white, away with a shriek and a roar and a battle, through the fields, through the woods, through the corn, through the hay, through the chalk, through the mold, through the clay, through the rock, among the objects, close at hand, and almost in the grass, ever flying from the traveller at a deceitful distance, ever moving slowly within him, like as in the track of the monstrous monster, death. Now, you can see this is clearly the noise of progress. It's clearly the noise of the locomotive. It's clearly the noise of mechanics. Now, the machine producing noise has its power. But what is more astonishing in Dickens's prose is that actually human feelings have a bigger power than the machine. Because as you can see, away with a shriek and a roar and a rattle from the town burrowing, and then again, away with a shriek and a roar and a rattle through the fields. We have a repetition of harsh sounds, very fast, but then Dickens forces us to stop all of a sudden in the last line, and he says, a deceitful distance, ever moving slowly within him. Longer words. So we are forced to slow down when we read, like as in the track of the remorseless monster, death. Human feelings, again, prevail over the machine. So for Dickens, yes, progress is coming, but human feelings are more important. Also, Dickens is famous for his measured rhythm. Again, what do I mean here? I have here an example from Damien's Sons. This is the moment when Paul is dying. Little Paul is the baby you see here, the little child sitting and watching at the sea with his sister Florence. He used to go by the sea and think and listen to the noise of the sea and of the rivers. And then, at the moment of his death, this image comes up to his mind again. His fancy had a strange tendency to wander to the river, which he knew was flowing through the great city, and now he thought how black it was, and how deep it would look, reflecting the host of stars, and more than all, how steadily it rolled away to meet the sea. Now you feel it. You feel there is something slowing down, that his heart is breaking down, he's eventually dying, but there's no atrocity in this. It's not like the noise of the train. We have a slowing down of death, like we're going back to a continuum. We're returning to the sea, to the big watery element, liquid element, where we came from. Now, how did he do it? Maybe if you look at this like this, now you see it better. His fancy had a strange tendency to wander to the river, which he knew was flowing to the great city, and now he thought how black it was, and how deep it would look, reflecting the host of stars, and more than all, how steadily it rolled to meet the sea. So you see this is how he achieved his results, okay? He used progressively shorter sentences, and then the last one immediately makes it longer, and makes our feelings solve into the sea together with little David's life. Now, even better, if you write this like this, the last line, and more than all how steadily it rolled away to meet the sea. We even have an internal rhyme here, okay, you see it here, it was in the same thing. If you write it as a couplet, you immediately realize how he used stress in his lyrics. Now, Dickens was actually famous for writing blank verse, even in his prose. Blank verse is a iambic pentameter, un pentametro iambico, which is an alternance of non-stressed and stressed syllables, and it was very much used in theatre. You will not be surprised if you think that Dickens was actually a very great actor, and this was actually his way of thinking. Now I'll give you another example of his mastery in blank verse. And now the bell she had so often heard by night and day, and listened to with solemn pleasure, almost as a living voice, rang its remorseless toll for her. So young, so beautiful, so good. Decrepit age and vigorous life and blooming youth and helpless infancy poured forth, on crutches, in the pride of strength and health, in the full blush of promise, in the mere dawn of life, to gather round her tomb. And, to see the blank verse, okay, if we put it in lines, and now the bell, she had so often heard by night and day, and listened to with solid pleasure, even as the living voice rang its remorseless toll for her. So young, so beautiful, so good. Now, Dickens was asked about this, and he hadn't probably realized that the name Nell actually hides a secret pun, as death knell is actually presagio di morte, okay? It's an event that means that the end of destruction of something will come soon. So the secret pun is revealed in the bells and the knells that resound in this passage. Now, when they asked Dickens about this, for instance, in 1844, Richard Horne presented these stanzas just the way I showed you. Dickens answered, "It is not an affectation in me, nor have I the least desire to write them in that meter, but they run into it involuntarily and unconsciously when I am very much in earnest. I even do so in speaking. I am not prepared to say that this may not be a defect in prose composition, but I attach less importance to it than I do to earnestness. And considering that it is a very melodious and agreeable march of words usually, and may be perfectly plain and free, I cannot agree with you that it is likely to be considered by a discreet reader as turgid or bombastic, unless the sentiments expressed in it be of that character. Then, indeed, it matters very little how they are attired, as they cannot fail to be disagreeable in any garb." Yet, later in 1846, in a letter to John Foster regarding the battle of life, he wrote, "If in going over the proofs you find the tendency to blank verse, I cannot help it when I am very much in earnest, too strong, knock out a word's brains here and there." So he eventually started feeling this as it was a bit too much. Now, okay, so long for that. Okay, we just want to switch to the comic, the other side of life. Now, the Pickwick papers I promised to talk about is a comic collection of episodes. We cannot really call it a novel. It didn't start with a plot. It is rather a collection of episodes with Mr. Pickwick and his club being the main protagonist of this work. Now, Dickens wrote this when he was very young. Yet, you will see he was already very good with language. Now, Dickens's humor in this book is generally expressed in 3 rhythms. We can call them Pickwickian rhythms. Right, first of all, the polysyllabic humor, second, paratactic, and third, mixed up. Let me explain this. To express what they mean, we can actually use the pictures of the 3 characters who best embody these rhythms. Now, the polysyllabic rhythm is the rhythm used by Mr. Pickwick. Is the rhythm used for humor by many Victorians. George Eliot, for instance, was famous for this. And is the rhythm they use when they want to sound bombastic. Okay, the grandeur, majestic words, very long, polysyllabic, because there is a tendency of using words which derive from Latin and have more than 3 syllables. And Mr. Pickwick, the eminent Mr. Pickwick, who clearly illustrates this, and how actually there is no need to use these words, and how too much, how hard the Victorians try to do their work. Paratactic, what do I mean here? Now you can see this fragmented image here. It's Mr. Jingle, the horrid Mr. Jingle. Mr. Jingle is a deceiver. He is an actor, and he wants to make people believe what he says, but because of this, he does not want to say too much. So his speech is fragmented, is very irregular, is very not fulfilled. And the third one, the mixed up, now I can translate this only with a word from the language of Sassari, Pidochatsadu language, okay? Now this is a language of the person that tries too hard. It is a language, you can see this is Samuel Weller here. You can see, okay, he is overdressed. He is a poor person, he's a worker, he's the servant of Mr. Pickwick. And he tries very hard to look better than he is. So he will use a language which is overcomplicated. Now I'll give you a clear example. This is an episode, is actually quite interesting episode, where Mr. Pickwick and his friends go to visit Mr. Wardle. Mr. Wardle has 2 very beautiful daughters and a spinster sister. This spinster sister is already 50-something and is not married, and she has no hope of getting married. And for a Victorian lady, this would be quite a disgrace. But Mr. Tupman, a friend of Mr. Pickwick, falls in love with Mrs. Rachel Wardle, and he wants to marry her, and he declares all his love to her in a very lovely manner, very appropriate, in a garden, and they kiss by the flowers. But while they're kissing, a fat boy appears, and this fat boy, who is always asleep, only in that moment in the book wakes up and sees them. Of course, the fat boy tells everyone about this, and Rachel's reputation, we've talked about reputation quite a lot, Rachel's reputation risks to be destroyed. So her brother and her mother are outraged by this and don't want her to talk to Mr. Tupman anymore. Mr. Jingle, the evil, awful, horrible, horrid actor, wants to marry Rachel because of the money, because Rachel has a good inheritance. So what he does is he makes Rachel believe that Tupman is interested in the money, and that for this reason he's marrying her, but he's actually in love with Rachel's niece. Then Mr. Jingle, the horrid one, goes to Mr. Tupman, poor young, well, he's actually quite old actually, poor old Mr. Tupman who wants to marry Rachel, and tells him that Rachel wants him to pretend to be in love with her niece to protect her reputation, and asks him to lend him £10 because he has some little expenses. And Mr. Tupman, because he is so good and he is so grateful for this man who is helping him with Rachel, gives him the money immediately and doesn't even give it to him in the hands, but just puts him in the pockets. So everything is done in a very Victorian proper way. Now, Mr. Jingle, with the £10, hires a carriage and convinces Rachel to run away with him, because he is the only one who will marry her. So Rachel runs away with him on the carriage. Mr. Tupman, when this is found, starts crying and says, "Oh God, this is why he used my money, and my lady, he stole my lady. And so Mr. Tupman is in a shock. Mr. Wardle, he's astonished. He's, oh my God, my sister, Rachel, the reputation of the family, everything is going to be destroyed. And Mr. Pickwick, with his aplomb, says, I'll help you. We go on a carriage and chase them. So off they go on a carriage, but of course, the carriage falls just as they reach the horrid Mr. Jingle. Now, Mr. Jingle waves at them with a handkerchief and says, off we go, and say goodbye to Tuppy, Mr. Tupman. Now, Dickens describes this moment of Pickwick's feelings. Nothing in the whole adventure, not even the upset, had disturbed the calm and equable current of Mr. Pickwick's temper. The villainy, however, which could first borrow money of his faithful follower and then abbreviate his name to Tuppy, was more than he could patiently bear. He drew his breath hard and coloured up to the very tips of his spectacles, and he said, slowly and emphatically, if I ever meet that man again, I'll... And that's it. Because this is Pickwick, okay? He's just a big sound and everything finishes there. And the horrible Mr. Jingle, of course, manages to reach a bed and breakfast with Rachel, and when they get there, they meet Sam Weller. And Sam Weller, who's going to become the servant of Pickwick, tells them that they cannot get married until they get a license. So Jingle offers to go and get the license. And Rachel, how you run on, said Rachel. Run on? Nothing to the hours, days, weeks, months, years, when we're united. Run on, Delphion, boat, missile, steam engine, thousands horsepower, nothing to it. Now, you see this, it's fragmented. It seems like it wants to say something, but really, sometimes there are words in it which don't match the content. Can't we be married before tomorrow morning? Inquired Rachel. Impossible, can't we? Notice on the church. Leave the license today. Ceremony come off tomorrow. I'm so terrified lest my brother should discover us, said Rachel. Discover? Nonsense. Too much shaking by the breakdown. Besides, extreme caution. Give up the post-chase. Walk down. Took a hackney coach. Come to the borough. Last place in the world that they will look. Ha 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 ha. Cap notion. That very ha ha ha. Now, they are caught. Pickwick manages to find them, and by offering money, magically on a level with the paper. And while glancing sideways at the letter, he is constructing, to form with his tongue, imaginary characters to correspond. These motions, although unquestionably of the greatest assistance to the original composition, retard in some degree the progress of the writer. And Sam had unconsciously been a full hour and a half writing words in small text, smearing out wrong letters with his little finger and putting in new ones which required going over very often to render them visible through old blots, when he was roused by the opening of the door and the entrance of his parent. So, polysyllabic raising of the climax. Here it starts. Sam and his father speak in Cockney. I cannot really reproduce Cockney accent, okay, so bear with me. Sam dipped his pen into the ink to be ready for any corrections and began with a very theatrical air. So he's reading his letter to his father. Lovely... Stop, said Mr. Weller, ringing the bell. A double glass of unwearable, my dear. He's asking for some wine because the moment requires wine to do a better assistance to his son. Very well, sir, repeated the girl, who with great quickness appeared, vanished, returned, and disappeared. Very quickly. So you notice this, okay? Vanished, returned, and disappeared. The quickness is in 3 verbs. Oh, they seem to know your ways here, observed Sam. Yes, replied his father, I've been here before in my time. Go on, Sammy. Lovely creature, repeated Sam. Tain't poetry, is it? Interposed his father. No, no, replied Sam. Very glad to hear it, said Mr. Weller. Poetry's unnatural. No man ever talked poetry except a bit on Boxing Day, or Wallace Blackings, or Roland's Oil, or some them those fellows. Never you let yourself down to talk poetry, my boy. Begin again, son. Mr. Weller resumed his pipe with critical solemnity, and Sam once more commenced and read as follows. Lovely creature, I feel myself to damned. Tain't proper, said Mr. Weller, taking his pipe from his mouth. No, it ain't damned, observed Sam, holding the letter up to the light. It's shamed. There's a blot here. I feel myself ashamed. Very good, said Mr. Weller. Go on. Feel myself ashamed and completely, sir. I forget what this word is, scratching his head with a pen in vain attempts to remember. Why don't you look at it then? Inquired Mr. Weller. So I am looking at it, replied Sam, but there's another blot. There's a C, and an I, and a D. Circumvented, maybe? Suggested Mr. Weller. No, it ain't that, said Sam. Circumscribed, that's it. That ain't as good a word as circumvented, Sammy, said Mr. Weller gravely. Think not. Nothing like it, said replied his father. But don't you think it means more? Inquired Sam. Well, perhaps it's a more tender word, said Mr. Weller, after a few moments' reflection. Go on, Sammy. Feel myself ashamed and completely circumscribed in addressing of you, for you are a nice girl and nothing but it. That's a very pretty sentiment, said the elder Mr. Weller, removing his pipe to make way for the remark. I don't like it. Right, they carry on reading the letter, and then in the end, Sam said he's going to do a rhyme to conclude it. And the father is really disappointed because nobody should use poetry. I don't like it, Sam, rejoined Mr. Weller. I never know the respectable coachman has wrote poetry, except one has made an affectionate copy of verses the night after he was hung for the highway robbery, and he was only a Campbell man, so even that's no rule. But Sam was not to be dissuaded from the poetical idea that had occurred to him, so he signed the letter, Your Love Sweet, Pickwick. Now, you see the comic coming out, springing out of the words, just because of the discrepancy of the levels of language that should be used. We could even say with Bergson, once our attention is fixed on the material aspect of the metaphor, the idea expressed becomes comic. Okay? Because we focus our attention not on the content, but on the form of what is being said, and immediately we perceive what's happening. Now, I promise in the paper I will try to expand this concept and see what happens in the translations. But because we're quite short of time today, I will only focus on the positio princeps, the last paragraph of the Pickwick papers. I've chosen for this purpose 3 translations. As you can see, we have almost 30 translations of the Pickwick papers in Italian. I chose 3 of them because they represent really the first translation, one which was done almost 50 years later, and then the last one, well, the last part one, in 2006 by Riccardo Rani. This is the paragraph. Mr. Pickwick is somewhat infirm now, but he retains all his former juvenility and spirit, and may still be frequently seen contemplating the pictures in the Dulwich Gallery or enjoying a walk about the pleasant neighborhood on a fine day. He is known by all the poor people about, who never fail to take their hats off as he passes with great respect. The children idolize him, and so indeed does the whole neighborhood. Every year he repairs to a large family merrymaking at Mr. Wardle's. On this, as on all other occasions, he is invariably attended by the faithful Sam, between whom and his master there exists a steady and reciprocal attachment, which nothing but death will terminate. Now, you can immediately appreciate, the mastery of Dickens only by this paragraph. First of all, we have Mr. Pickwick. He is the beginning of our sentence. The eminent man. This eminent man is then put in relation to the environment, to the whole world. In this case, his world is his neighborhood. In his neighborhood, he is eminent, proeminent. He stands out of the crowd, and everybody respects him and bows their head when they see him. Then he focuses even more his lens, and from the neighborhood he goes to his familiar habits and the family of Mr. Wardle. Then the lens focuses on basically Mr. Pickwick sitting on a chair with his friend Sam. And this is the conclusion of our story. It's an embrace of familiarity. Mr. Pickwick, who has kept company for 57 chapters to his readers, now is leaving us and he's at home. And he is quite fine. Yet, Dickens places the word death again. Pickwick is not dying, but the word death is here because this is the conclusion of the book. So, he uses death in a different context, because only death will break the friendship. So death, in this case, is almost annihilated by friendship, because in this moment there is a big friendship which is holding Mr. Pickwick and is protecting him while this book terminates. Now, what happens in the translation? Vi saluto un po' cagionevole, ma osserva tutta la gioventù dello spirito e lo si vede spesso a contemplare i quadri nella galleria di Dulwich o a passeggiare nelle belle giornate per l'amena campagna. È conosciuto da tutta la povera gente dei dintorni, che non manca mai di cavarsi rispettosamente il cappello tutte le volte che lo incontra per via. I bambini lo adorano, e come i bambini così tutto l'intero vicinato. Tutti gli anni egli si reca a una grande festa di famiglia in casa di Wardle, accompagnato così in questa come in ogni altra occasione dall'immancabile Sam. E tra Sam e il padrone esiste sempre un'affezione solida e reciproca che soltanto la morte potrà distruggere. Distruggere, paroxytonal word, sdrucciola, quite good for an ending, but is not terminate. Terminate at the end of the book give a sensation of finish. This is Dettore Translation, Ugo Dettore Translations in 1943. Adesso è un po' cagionevole di salute, ma serba tutta l'antica giovinezza di spirito e lo si può spesso vedere mentre contempla i quadri della Pinacoteca Dulwich o fa una passeggiata in quegli ameni dintorni in una bella giornata. Tutti i poveri delle vicinanze lo riconoscono e non mancano mai di togliersi il cappello con gran rispetto quando si passa. I bambini lo adorano e così l'intero vicinato. Ogni anno si reca una gran festa di famiglia dei Wardle. In questa, come in tutte le altre occasioni, è invariabilmente accompagnato dal fedele Sam. E tra Sam e il padrone esiste un affetto solido e reciproco che solo la morte potrà spezzare. E questa è anche la soluzione adottata da Ryan, lei si è aggiunta. Adesso gli acciacchi dell'età si fanno sentire anche per Mr. Pickwick, ma ciò nonostante serba intacta tutta l'antica giovinezza di spirito e ancora lo si può vedere abbastanza spesso mentre contempla i dipinti della Pinacoteca di Dulwich o mentre fa una passeggiata per tutti quegli ameni dintorni di una bella giornata. Tutti i poveri delle vicinanze lo conoscono e non mancano mai di togliersi rispettosamente il cappello al suo passaggio. I bambini lo adorano, come del resto tutti quelli che gli sono accanto. You can see here, ok, nelle vicinanze e accanto, we lose neighborhood. Dickens used neighborhood twice, and it was not because he was short of words. Okay, he wanted this to be repeated, and in the translations we miss this. Ogni anno si reca una gran festa di famiglia del Wordle, accompagnato, come in tutte le altre occasioni, dal fedele Sam. E tra Sam e il suo padrone esiste un saldo reciproco affetto che soltanto la morte potrà spezzare. Again. Now, yesterday, Professor Javeri challenged me, okay, when you asked the question about proparoxyton word, I thought, can we not find a proparoxyton appropriate way to conclude this? I failed, I couldn't, sorry, but I did my best, and so I tried to find a new translation for this. Qui solo la morte potrà por fine. No, thank you. Now, I have to say, I will defend my choice, because what I wanted to do is, first of all, I can see this, potrà por fine is horrendous. Also, in English, we don't have potrà, we don't have the possibility there. It just came out of my pen, okay? And I'm not a translator, I'm hopeless as a translator, I know this. But I quite like to have the word fine at the end, for some reason. First, because it reproduces the effect of terminate. Also because fine, as an adjective, could be una persona fine. And it makes me think that I'm kind of reproducing Mr. Pickwick's image, a fine fellow, in this fine in my end. Also, this would be quite appropriate in Dickensian terms, because it would be a fine endings. Dickens was not a person of happy endings, he was for appropriate, proper, fine endings. And so I thought they could be for today the end. Thank you.
Allora, credo che il nostro pomeriggio è stato molto ricco e che questa sia un'ottima maniera di concludere